welcome everybody. It's
Indeed.
interview time, baby. Andrew here, and we got Ben. Go ahead.
And this is Ben, and with us is Adam Schomer from Selling Superman, a documentary series that we are going to be covering right now for this interview. So welcome, Adam.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Andrew. Happy to be here.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we came in contact because we are part of the Geekscape podcast network, and Geekscape is featured in this this documentary series. It's a 4-part documentary series, and I'll have you go into it in a bit. But that's kind of how we've linked up. And for our audience members who haven't seen this yet or don't know what this is, share with us what Selling Superman is about and how it came to be.
Sure. Yeah, there's this 40-year family secret, a comic book collection that the family, the sons had to keep secret, couldn't tell anyone, which you can imagine would be crazy, hard to do. That contains 300,000 comic books, a Superman #1 that eventually was graded at 7.0. That the father never graded anything, was too paranoid to do that. But as they're unboxing this huge collection, 1 million collectibles actually too, they're really unboxing the trauma, the story, how the collection broke up the family, and dealing with, a lot of pain, stress, anxiety along the way. So you got this cool mix of a buddy treasure. What do you do with something that's so amazing like this? Do you sell it when it's this thing that also reminds you of the pain and why the family broke up? But it's this amazing thing called Superman #1. So what do you do? So it's got this great inner conflict, and thankfully they let me into their world, and the family portrait just unravels. So how was that for a quick summary?
That's good. How'd you get in contact with them? Were you family friends with them growing up, or?
Yeah, we went to the same high school, Birmingham Groves in Metro Detroit, Michigan, and I'm a couple years older than him, so we played soccer together. He was a great player, so he was playing up on varsity. I was a great player. I remember we took Darren in under our wings. And so, you become tight, but you're not necessarily like drinking buddies, when you're a couple classes apart. And but years later, 25 years later, we were in touch about tech business. Darren's in the tech world. And eventually he called me and said, I know you make documentaries, and well, you think this would make I don't know, you think this is interesting? I'm like, oh my God, this is insanely interesting. Why do people pay this much money for comics? Because I'm an outsider. I had no idea a comic could go for $3 million, $4 million. It still blows my mind.
Yeah, so sure. I feel like if it was me, it would be no question I would sell that stuff.
Yes.
Like Ben and I, we're comics fans, but when we're talking millions of dollars,
yeah.
What do you think about this, right?
Superman #1,
right?
I can read Superman #1 on DC Universe Infinite without having to pay a cent. So, in terms of reading through it, well, that's the other thing that struck me was, yes, there are. You said 30,000 comics, 30,000 comics.
300,000.
300,000 comics. Sorry, 300,000 comics. And as we see in the documentary, there are a ton of duplicates of these. Yeah. So, even if you just kept one, you can still make millions off of selling all the rest that you have of the same comic that
Absolutely.
they had. So for sure, I'd keep one, sell the rest, still make money while still basically you can have your cake and eat it too with this collection.
Yeah,
agreed. So people know, 300,000 comics. People come across these kind of collections, but in the pristine condition, high grade, multiple copies. That's what makes this kind of a world-class collection, and something that when there's 8 copies of giant size X-Men 1 that are all at 9.6, 9.8, again, $25,000 books. It's just it's kind of weird. How do they get these? Yeah.
And so this documentary is about mainly, comics-wise at least, selling Action Comics #1, the first Superman comic.
Not Action 1, Superman 1.
Oh, Superman 1. Sorry, yeah, Action Comics is different. Yeah, anyway.
That is the first appearance, Action 1. This at least I know. The limited stuff I know. There it is. Yeah, but when Superman got his first TV show, basically, where he was the star, but meaning his book, in the TV world, I don't think film world, we wouldn't be like, oh, I got to own the first guest appearance of Brad Pitt. We'd want to know the first thing he starred in. So to me, actually, Superman #1 to me is better than Action 1, but I'm not the one making the rules.
Oh, that's a good point, actually. Yeah, because if it was like Brad Pitt, you would have to get Thelma and Louise.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
know, that would be
Exactly.
that would be the item you'd need, or a lot of stars start off on what soap
Good
operas and
knowledge.
stuff.
Clooney
Yeah,
was a
Mhm.
soap opera
Yeah.
guy. Yeah.
Clooney was
Mhm.
soap opera, all these kind of guys, right? So
Rotten
yeah,
Tomatoes movie he was in. Life is
yeah,
Life.
You want to see?
all that
Wow.
stuff.
Yeah.
So, uh, what was the number it finally sold at? The most expensive one that he had?
This, that there. Well, all right. So, I mean, I don't want to spoil it too much for people, but
Oh, okay. We could skip that if it's a huge spoiler. I'm sorry, I forgot
it.
about that part out of it.
Well, I mean, that is the crux of, will he sell it? Will he not? But there is a big book that does sell for $1 million in the show. I'll just say that.
Okay,
Yeah,
got it. Okay.
we'll go that far. We'll go that far.
He, in the documentary, he seems to have some issue in selling his collection because he has an attachment to his father, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially that book. I mean, and he loves Superman himself. He loves the morals of Superman. And yeah, what's kind of doing right by the father, doing right by a man that spent so much time collecting this. And also, really, I think doing right by, let's get the books in the right hands, because his dad didn't even read them with him. Like, they couldn't
Right.
share it. He never let Darren in. And Darren always wanted that. So for Darren bringing in friends and having this treasure hunt and having this, how do we do this together, was kind of what he always wanted, to make it a family thing. So I think that really played a big part of it. Darren wanted to make it a family thing and almost rewrite the story of these comics. So it to me kind of changed as we went, how much it mattered what the father would have wanted, or if Darren was having trouble because it was his dad's love, as much as like, oh, what's just the right thing to do here? What's the right thing for the comics? And ultimately then I think Darren comes more toward what's right for him and his own healing, as I think we all have to do, like
Right.
kind of separate from our parents in many ways. What's our best life versus what they want for us?
Mhm.
I could see
Yeah,
that
something-
being a thing because,
Yeah.
sorry, just one last thing, Ben. He's like you say, a Superman fan. He's wearing Superman shirts throughout the
Yeah.
documentary,
Even a
and
Lexo
he's
shirt. That's
he's probably one of those guys that started working out because he likes Superman. He
Probably.
looks buff as hell, and like
He wasn't like that in
it's-
high school. He was a thin little kid in high school.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But he the morals of Superman, but then combine that with his issues with his father. This is public with the documentary, so I feel somewhat okay talking
Absolutely.
about this.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
Go for it.
yeah. So I don't know. I guess it's like, do I follow how I feel about Superman, or do I follow my father's wishes? Like, I guess that was probably somewhat in his brain. Do you have? Did you feel like that was part of his deal, or?
Yeah, his father didn't leave any actual wishes, which is crazy because he was a lawyer for wills and things, and it's it's the great irony, but he kind of just wanted to be shot up into a UFO with his books. That's what Darren said. His dad would somewhat joke, but when you have no plan to sell, it's not that big of a joke, and you don't tell the kids what you want them to do with it. So he didn't really know, which is a bummer, because then he could have fulfilled those wishes. And I do think it tore at him a bunch. Like, selling one of these big books, like, they're really hard to get back. So if you have any regret afterwards of what you've done, like your dad amassed, it's hard to find a Superman #1. His dad found it. It's hard to find a Batman 1. His dad found all these copies. It's kind of amazing. His dad was collecting from the early 70s, maybe earlier, and all the way through probably till 2000, a good 40 years of collecting. So I think it did pain him to sell certain things, And he definitely pulled back a lot too. You know, we would take a step forward, then he'd pull back and be like, what am I doing? Why are we letting these go so quick? I haven't looked at all the books and we're already selling them. You know, there's a weird thing. Like, it's hard to look through 300,000 books. So on some level, you have to kind of just start getting rid of them, and you might not have looked at all of them and like, oh, I didn't see that Daredevil one that graded at, you know, was raw. We thought it was a 9.5, but now someone just graded for a 9.8, and you feel like, oh, what did I do? I just left like 30 grand on the table. You know, poor example. Again, I don't know comic books, but that has kind of happened where people graded afterwards and have like definitely scored.
That's awesome.
It is
What
awesome.
were you going to
Yeah.
say? What were you gonna say?
What I was going to say earlier, we kind of tied into what you were talking about with the relationship with the father. So I think a lot of people, on first glance, it's called selling Superman. So it's like, oh, it's about selling comics. And I think you sell them on that, but then you bring them in with this story about the family and the father and son. And that's the heart of it. And to share something personally, which we have kind of acknowledged in the show before, but I lost my dad a few months ago. So I'm watching this. Thank you. Wow. I'm watching this from that perspective, and I think some of the highlights to me were those moments of him. Not to give too much away, but like there's a moment in this series where he witnesses the bonding between father and son over these comics that he's provided, and kind of wishing that he had that bond with his own dad. But
absolutely,
there's still kind of, even though there's a sadness to it, there's a poignancy to it, there's a bittersweetness to it in terms of like, well, even though I didn't get to have that, I can provide that gift to other people. I can give them what I didn't get to have. And that in itself is totally the spirit of Superman. It's totally the spirit of superheroes being able to do that. And you know, so many of these superheroes come from families that have been somewhat broken or disconnected due to losing parents. You know, that's a common theme with a lot of these. And so here we are, even though he's not, you know, a baby who's been separated from his planet like Superman, he is a grown man who still is taking on the decision to say like, hey, I didn't get to have this, but let me provide this for other people. Let me give this to other people. And I thought that was an amazing moment.
I think so too. I think Darren has a real big heart like that. And then he also realizes, I think like some of the more nuanced superheroes do, including Superman, is that it's not easy to serve all the time, or doing the right thing also comes with a cost, you know, whereas like that's where Darren really likes watching Superman and Lois, or Lois and Clark, or I forget the names, but both of them. A little both there. So, because it's like the real life trade-offs of, do you go serve humanity, but you missed your kid's game, you know? And Darren, like, oh, he's helping out the hatchback kid and his dad, and he gets to watch them have that. But you know, Darren's missing a lot of time on other things in life because he's dealing with this collection. I mean, it takes a lot of work. So I'm sure at some points Darren's resenting the burden of 300,000 comics books that he has to do right by, and he'd rather just kind of, you know, take care of his businesses. I mean, he's a self-made businessman as it is. He doesn't really need the millions from this collection, which I love.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Was there any reason why he would buy 30 copies of the same book? Just other than
his father?
Yeah, other than OCD combined with Asperger's.
I think I think it probably wasn't the obsessive nature or fixation as much as like, oh, it's a good investment. If I think it's a good deal for one, why wouldn't I think it's a good deal for 20? So when he came across deals, I think that's how he was thinking, like with the giant size X-Men. There was a box of 200, as we found out, and it's not really a spoiler, but in episode 4, we find out how he got the giant size X-Men, and there was a box of 200 that a local store found, realized they still had. He had been doing law for that store, and that was their buddy, as they would trade comic books, and the guy didn't give him all of them, but he was able to pry 10 away from him at that time. And I think he just realized, because the book was already going for $40 in 1982, like, oh, that's a book that's probably a solid investment or good to have.
Okay.
So I mean, he's very, very intelligent man, and like, again, he wasn't really reading these either. It is
He didn't
strange.
even read him at all? The father didn't read him at all?
Didn't touch
As
him.
far as I know, he really wasn't that into that. He just liked the collecting aspect and like having it,
Wow.
and knowing that's worth something and that's cool. And he loves Superman, so he must have read the Superman stories. But from what I know, he would basically take them and just put them next to the next box and put it next to the next box and cover it, and that's it.
Could be why they're in such good condition.
It's exactly
Yeah.
why they're in such good condition. And they could have not been, because Michigan basements can flood, and in episode 1 we're kind of in a half basement there, and we see where one of the 5 rooms that was full of comics was, and I mean that so easily could have flooded. Growing up in Michigan, I realized it. So they dodged a lot of bullets. Yeah, I think he's really lucky. Yeah.
Was there any info on? Forgive me if you said this in a documentary. I might have just missed it. But how much? What's the estimated price that he bought Action Comics #1 at in the 70s or whenever it was? Did you ever look into that?
The Superman #1, just to be clear again.
I'm sorry, Superman #1. Yes.
Yeah. No, we did not say that because no one knows even where he got it from.
God.
We go on a
That's
hunt
incredible.
for that. Yeah, we do go on Darren goes on a little hunt to try to find that out in episode 4. And we get a certain, amount of the way. And there's stuff we didn't include in episode 4 where we got closer. We thought we had a guy in Chicago. And this is kind of fascinating. If we have a second, we end up zooming. So Andy is one of the guys we found from an old comic book store. And Andy then led us to this guy in Chicago that we thought sold, he did in his life, this guy sell a Superman 1 and a Batman 1. And we're like, okay, in Chicago and Detroit, not too far apart. We think we're onto something. This dude's 92 years old. He had a record of every book he sold, how much,
Wow.
where, when, like
Awesome.
unbelievable. He also had a journal for every day of his life on what he did.
Wow.
I
Awesome.
never met someone like this, and in good order where he could access it. And I'm like, God, you are an amazing human. So he was able to tell us exactly, this guy in Chicago, when his sold, and we deduced that that could not have been the one that went to Darren's dad, just from when Darren's dad had it. Yeah. So we thought
too easy.
Yeah, we thought we were there, and that would have been cool to know, where it came from.
How much did that one sell for? Did you remember that price?
I think that was in the that might have been the one that went for it might have been the one in the 80s that went for like $100,000. Is that right?
Okay. So that comic has gone from like 100,000 to anywhere from 1 to 3 million these days, 4 million or whatever.
Yeah, I can tell you the highest sale of a Superman #1 that went for 5.3 million.
Okay. Yeah.
One, and that happened. Yeah, as we were filming, so in like 22. I have talked to that person, and they bought theirs for about $130,000 in the early 80s. That's why I was thinking that. So I know, and I know he had to borrow money, and he definitely outbid other people by a lot to kind of make the deal happen. Like he just overshot because he knew it was worth something, and he held it for 30 years. He did hold it for 30 years before he sold it.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Wow.
Incredible.
He wouldn't let me. I filmed him, but in the end, he declined to let me use it. And I gave him that option, as a filmmaker thing. I said, look, if you're iffy, just let me come film you. You can decide after. I just want the chance to, it'd be cool to meet you anyway. And in the end, he's like, I'd rather stay more anonymous, just extended family and stuff. I don't want. He's super private. Like I don't want my cousins and people knowing that I had this.
Because it was a little, maybe even embarrassing at that time.
Meaning I think to the extent of I just don't want people knowing I have a lot of money.
Oh, right. Because he was an architect, right?
Not Darren's dad, but this guy that wouldn't let us film. I can't say anything about that. Darren's dad was, upper middle class. Darren's dad was upper middle class. Did law for a while. Owned a donut shop and some different things. Yeah, but that was the other owner of a Superman. That I just find that those characters fascinating and what they want to tell and don't want to share and keep hidden. And people think, oh, if they know I have money, they're going to ask for money. And I always think, I don't know. I mean, I know people that have money, and I'm not sitting there asking them even to buy me dinner every day. So, I mean, like, I know. So I think we conflate things and we don't trust people enough, but that's my view.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I'm familiar. One of the guests that you have throughout the series is Christopher Vogler, who I'm familiar with from the writer's journey, which I have here.
Yes.
So, and I was surprised because, I mean, mainly as somebody who's read his book, I don't remember any mentions of Superman. There's a lot of Wizard of Oz, but there's not a lot of mentions of Superman. So I was never really associated him with comic book stories until like I saw him in this with his own like collection of stuff. I had no idea about this guy. So what led to him joining the documentary series? Like, is he somebody you knew beforehand? Did he know the family?
No. I just really respected his work from reading similar books and archetypes. I wanted someone to speak about archetypes specifically because I feel they're so important when it comes to the superhero genre and like savior mentality and why we're attracted to that. And he does speak to that, later in the series. What I didn't know was that he had a collection in his basement of all these Roman little toys. And I had and not till I arrived, Ben, like, like you think he'd mention. I got there and I'm like, what was going on here? So, so to me, actually, it was kind of a coup to get him. I was really, really happy because I knew the way he would speak to it. And I knew he had also call it a consciousness background, or he had a real sensibility to him. Because in the end of that book, that book that you have there, he talks about kind of getting lost on the path and faith and taking little steps toward it and following some ants. And I could tell this guy, I'm like, oh, this guy has a spirituality to him, and he is like an old hippie. So I thought, okay, this is someone that can maybe say some things that I want to say, and so that I, as a director, don't have to just voice it over. I can have this authority speak to the Lord of the Rings. I can have him speak to the savior mentality, and then I had no idea he'd go into like collecting being a mental illness, and who better to say it than a collector? I can't say it's a mental illness. I'll get fried, but he can sit there and say it is. He's like, because I am one. Yeah. So he's so great. He was just so gracious and fun. Yeah.
Yeah, and so much of the writer's journey is on, for those who aren't familiar with it, so much of it is on the hero's journey.
Yes.
The Joseph Campbell type of structure, which has been in so many different types of like genre films, but in basically every superhero origin movie is in some way like a version of that, right down to like mentor characters, some like refusal of the call, like all these different aspects of it. So it did feel very appropriate that he was a part of it. If you couldn't get Joseph Campbell because he's long gone, like you can get Christopher Vogler. It's a
similar authority. Yes. I think he informed a lot of people in Hollywood, of like, hey, here's the simple journey that you can kind of use and follow, for better or for worse. Some people don't like it because it maybe feels formulaic, but it's meant to be a guidepost, I think, just to see if you're struck. Like, that's how I see structure. I don't know about you, Ben, but structure is there if the story, if something is not working or it's failing, then you can lean back on structure versus like feel confined by it.
No, I definitely agree. I feel like a lot of times, especially because writers are, if we're talking 3x structure of like a screenplay, they're infamously lost when it comes to the second act. So just to have like some sort of midpoint or different sequences, or just like, okay, what's the goal again, or something to high points and low points to fall back onto, is always something that is a sense of comfort, I think, where it's just like, good way to say it. I can lead up to this, so I kind of know these points. Now I have at least something, and then I can fill in the blank, as opposed to this just big canvas of just like, I know how it begins, I know how it ends. How do we get there? Hell if I know.
Yeah. And I mean, I went through this. I don't write with the hero's journey in mind by any means, but I definitely, with this one, because it's around Superman, I wanted to make sure I was hitting some of those posts, right? So I went through his book and I was saying, okay, this is where we're doing this. This is where we're doing this. And you think you've got, the elixir, if you will, but you don't yet. Like you've overcome some big obstacle, and I would call that the end of episode 3 and the beginning of episode 4, where he's kind of overcome the main crisis where all the trolls and internet trolls are coming at him. It's like, but now what? Like that's not really the goal. You know, there's something still lacking inside him that he has to go find, the real elixir. So that's where I said to myself, like, oh, episode 4 is now I need something deeper. And that's why I had him start searching for the origin of his father, Superman, and really the origin of his father in that final kind of elixir. Because like, if I can understand my father, maybe I can understand myself. That's how I was thinking about it for it to work. And, you know, there's something left for us. Plus, we're still dangling, will he sell the book or not at that point?
Sure.
You know? Yeah.
That's sort of what it felt like to me. Like, it was like the movie was like art therapy for maybe you, but definitely for him. But also, it seemed like at times he was saying he wasn't into making the movie.
Absolutely,
at certain parts. But do you feel like by the end of it, I mean, I guess the movie's going to release, so it probably is a positive end result. But still, like, do you think that he went on like was making the movie therapeutic for him?
Yeah. I think, you know, I think he still wishes he didn't do it, the movie.
Oh, really?
Yeah, absolutely. All in all, I think it took a toll on him. I think it pushed him faster to grow and face some of his demons faster than he wanted to and publicly wanted to. But that said, I do believe he's grateful for the journey we took and how he has had to grow. And he definitely sees now, because, you know, we've been out on Apple and Amazon for a couple weeks now. He's definitely getting a lot of letters from people that say, I'm changing how I'm collecting. I'm talking to my kids more. I'm valuing family. The way you opened up and were vulnerable, that was important to me. You know, I have mental health issues. So he's seeing people actually react in a good way. And I think that helps temper how difficult it was for him to realize in that superhero way, like, okay, I helped other people. So maybe this was worth the pain I've gone through. Only time will tell, you know, if it does really outweigh. And he does, you know, in a couple of years say, no, I'm happy I did the film. But I think he still would rather have not at this point.
Yeah.
He would rather have not, because it was too many painful memories to approach and to face. Is that pretty much what it was?
And to have it on film forever.
Yeah, and to lose some privacy with that.
Yeah,
in that regard. Yeah,
absolutely. Because you know, especially if you have a kind of built-in perfectionism because of how your father raised you, it's almost astounding that he let us in so deeply into his inner world, because it's allowing us to see the imperfection of life, and we are all imperfect. So I think the reality that starts to hit at some point, and then it's like, oh my God, it's going to be captured forever in a certain way, and there's way more to the story, and people won't know the full picture. And they, you know, for me, not being understood is a very big pain point if people don't understand what I'm trying to say. It's probably why I talk a lot, so you can tell me to shut up anytime. So I can really, okay, I can empathize with Darren a lot with wanting to be understood, and having that kind of in the hands of a director, and the hands of like, oh, it's a contained thing. And he's like, well, but I'd like them to know about this too, and this too, and this too, and this too. And I'm like, yeah, but you can only tell so much and keep it interesting. Right. So, and like he's changing now, right? You know what I mean? Like in a year, he'll be a different person. And it's tough to have like a legacy just on tape, on VHS forever.
On Betamax forever.
on Betamax forever.
I think another factor too, which is it's brought up in the very, very beginning. You kind of have this flash forward. He's bringing up like, I still haven't had time to mourn either. Like he's fresh off of this, this loss that he's experienced, and it kind of speaks to what you're talking about earlier about how like in some ways the hero has to make a sacrifice to achieve his calling, right? In order to help other people. Here, like it's almost like he sacrificed his own time for, you know, mourning, or like I during this series, I was like, oh yeah, he is married. Like there's the part where we meet his wife, and I'm like, oh yeah, he also has like other things going on. But I'm sure you know there's a lot that like this like took out of him in terms of just like, oh, this is if I didn't do this, maybe I could have, like, things could have just slowed down a little bit. I would have been able to absorb a lot more. But at the same time, like you said, like he wouldn't have had the journey that he had, the journey that he shared with you and with all of us in watching this. So it's kind of like, well, in some ways he gets to fulfill being the hero of that, or making that sacrifice. And I think time will tell, as you said. I think the wound sounds like it's still fresh. I can't speak for him, but it sounds like time will tell. But it sounds like he's already appreciative of the journey.
Yeah. A lot more so, especially because of the reactions from people, and that it does mean a lot to him. It's just, I mean, I also poke, I like the inner world a lot. That's like,
Sure.
to me, the cooler thing. I'm not making superhero films where I think comics probably do a lot better job than Hollywood. Hollywood probably a lot more action, and then at the end, let's throw a little bit of theme, or a moral at the end. And I'm like, come on, give me something more. I love the inner world, so I was going to be poking that the whole time, asking him questions that he might not just be sitting around thinking. So yeah, we definitely, I'd say, opened up wounds, and takes time. Like, you're in someone's life, like, hey, another 5 days, we want to hang with you again, and please make time for us. Thankfully, again, he owns his own business, so he's able to do that kind of thing.
You grew up with him, you said, right? So you knew
High school.
of his dad's reputation, or did he have a reputation? Did you know?
No, I didn't know of the reputation. I knew him. His dad was always cool to me after soccer games. I mean, his dad coached Darren also. I didn't know his dad was so hard on Darren, behind the scenes. We had no idea. Some of his closest friends knew that, as they say in the film, like, his dad was really hard on him. I didn't see any of that. I just knew his dad was just super cool to me. I was the captain of the team, so I was like, good job. You're doing great out there.
Okay.
Yeah, there was nothing spoken about Asperger's, nothing spoken about the comics. Didn't know, of course, you rarely know some of your friends, like, parents are not happy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't know.
I
But
remember-
it is cool 30 years later to sit down with your buddy's mom and go, what'd you like about Dale? And her to be real and be like, well,
Right.
you marry
Right.
you marry the devil, and he was like my dad, so it was a lesser, I'm like, Jesus, like, wow, thank you. Like, that is so honest. Like, I was blown away, like, just so insightful and honest. You marry the devil, and he could stand up to my father, and he treated me nicely, and I thought that was great. It's like, oh yeah, most people would sugarcoat that. That was a really beautiful answer. So,
Do you find with documentary film? Yeah, do you find, like, with documentary, that there are times where something like that happens, where, like, they've been holding this in, and now that the camera's in, and suddenly it just comes out, like, that's because that's what it sounds like when it came to her.
Yeah, sometimes very private, shy people on camera really go for it. I've seen that in one of my series, The Road to Dharma. We're on motorcycles in the Himalayas, and Jen, who's somewhat reserved when the camera turned on, wow, boom, just almost like she was in therapy, So some people, they just turn on camera. Other people, not so much. So you never know. That's why I had to do that first test with Darren and his family on Thanksgiving of 2021, where I went alone and we went in the old house. And that's when I realized, to be honest, that, I think we have something here, because they are very articulate. They are very open. And of course, it just got more and more interesting the more I asked. Darren didn't just, like, lay it all out to me, and tell me everything. I was kind of like the plays, like, I'm learning it as we go throughout I didn't know there was an Aunt Linda in Orlando who was collecting dolls till like a month before. He's like, hey, we have to go to Florida. And by the way, my aunt's there, and she does XYZ. I'm like, why haven't you mentioned this in a year that we've been filming? But you understand, like, protecting the people in your family and not necessarily exposing everything. So, God, yeah, it was over and over, just jaw dropping at what was revealed little by little to me also. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Wow. So do you feel, you said you weren't like a huge comic book fan, and you probably still aren't in a lot of ways, but do you feel like through this process you have become more familiar with and have a deeper respect for superheroes, maybe as a myth, or some sort of on a grand scale kind of thing?
Yeah, for sure, because it's helped so many people. That's why, because, and it's so different than Hollywood necessarily treats it, because they just market and monetize. To me, my view of it is like, wow, over and over, same stories, and it's getting a little old. And I think a lot of people share that view. But seeing how much the comics mean to people, and like Eric in the film who resonated with Iron Man and about bullying, and he's like, oh yeah, I wish I would have had that. And I can see how the heroes became something to aspire to, or kind of a friend or an escape, because we all need a little escape, as Eric was telling me, at least, like from the harshness of like middle school. I need a little somewhere to escape where it's a little more black and white, and that's where my own bias coming in felt that way. I would have to say that most people were my bias was that most people were using comics as an escape because it's easy, it's black and white, it's heroes, villains, and that feels good because it feels like some kind of control and understanding of the world, when the world really isn't black and white, and it's hard to know who's your friend or not and who's lying or not, and that's difficult to navigate in this world, who's evil. But over here in the comic book world, it's simple. That bias, I think, was somewhat shattered to me, and I just found that I find that people were just really resonating for totally different reasons. Yes, a little escape, but more like, oh, I love the morals of this guy, and I love how he helps people, and oh, it helped me think of that for myself and to be like that, or I just like being with my friends talking about it. I'm like, oh, I like talking about soccer with my friends. Like, okay, that's the same thing.
So what's the difference?
So, yeah, what's the difference? What's the difference? One people like superheroes, and one people like Messi and Ronaldo. There's no difference.
Right.
Yeah. For some reason, I'm moved to say this. I'm a big fan of this guy, Grant Morrison, and Ben, of course, knows who he is, and a lot of our viewership. He's a comic book creator, and he often has like a lot of deep things to say about superheroes. And he has said in the past that, I forget who it was Valignano or something named like that, this Greek philosopher or Italian philosopher had this in the 1600s or something, had something called the Oration on the Divinity of Angels or something like that. It's the name of it. Mm-hmm. And in this oration, he says that humans are always copying. We want to fly like birds. We want to swim like fish. We're never quite content with just ourselves. To be just man is terrible. We hate it. And so that's why we want to be all these animals. So where do superheroes come in? The way what Grant Morrison does with this is he says that we've created something to mimic. If you were to zoom out on superheroes as a myth, we've created newer angels. Essentially, we know they're fake. Yeah. We know they're fake this time, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But so now we have this structure, this I guess system. I don't know, but now we have a moral superior, something morally superior. It's fake, but still, it's something to mimic now. And
I like that.
I don't know. You were just sort of reminding me of that while you were talking. That Superman can come up.
I relate to that, and I relate to the ideas of where we replace religion kind of with different saviors. Because you mentioned angels. Like we're less religious nowadays in the U.S. And we still need role models, and we still need angels, so to speak, to remind us of characteristics. And in the yogic tradition, I don't think of like the yogic gods and goddesses as actual god. I think they're characteristics, and they remind us of certain things. But then maybe like there is this craving. I think Vogler would agree, for a savior. We want someone to come down and make it better. We want Jesus to come back again and like tell us how to do this right, because it ain't going right. That's the part where like we don't have that necessarily, let's say, in religion anymore. So we turn to these superheroes to be like, these guys could come save us from the evils. And I think that's a tricky place to hang out. Personally, I know what you're saying. I don't want any saviors, to be honest.
Right. Well, there's the inspirational factor we have to acknowledge too, where Because it's interesting when Robin was first created for Batman, right? They said like, oh, this is the audience surrogate, right? This is the kids read this, right? And so they can be like, oh, you can be Robin, and Batman's kind of like your dad figure. And Andrew and I have agreed with this, where like when we looked at Batman and Robin, even though we were kids, we didn't think like, oh, we're Robin. We're like, no, I want to be Batman.
No, it's
Like,
all about Batman. Are you kidding
I want to
me?
be, yeah. So it was less about like, oh, this is you, and more about like, oh, I want to be the guy who works hard and is super determined and is looking out for people and, you know, believes in redemption and all these different aspects. It wasn't necessarily like, oh, like I want to be with the superhero. It was, I want to be the hero. I want to be the superhero myself. I want to, like, oh, I'm modeling myself all these characteristics. There's this. It's been kind of
That's
viral,
healthy,
and I had to look.
right?
Yeah, like it's been kind of viral. I've been kind of looking into it to see whether it's real, and apparently there are real studies on what they call the Batman effect, which is the idea of taking on an alter ego to enable you to do things that you find difficult to do as yourself. That ideally are things that are like you're afraid of doing, things that push you outside your comfort zone. All these aspects, and so to me, that's another effect of what we're talking about, where just like it's taking what you see in the comic and is less about what we're sort of talking about critically of the idea of like someone saving us and being like, okay, this is how we save ourselves. This is how I reach my potential, right? As a human being.
That's how I feel about it. I'm not really searching for a savior at all, but I am looking, I guess I'm looking for something to mimic. I think in some ways. So, and to reach potential, like you just said, Ben. Like, of course, it's fucking superheroes. It's impossible, but inspiration.
Cool.
Inspiration is the name of the game. Yeah.
Especially the morals or the character of it. Or I love that idea of a kind of an alter. Whenever I put on a mask, or I don't know, maybe when I'm, you know, I guess as an athlete, I was an athlete growing up on the soccer field. I could be a different way than I could be in life.
Right.
I could hit people. I could yell at a referee. I could be emotional, and it was celebrated. It was absolutely celebrated to be tenacious and let everything out and scream and, you know, hug each other and high five, you know, and that's just not how it is when you're walking around life. So maybe that's like why people, you know, you find somewhere where you can be the best of yourself or come close to it. That sounds cool.
Yeah, your outlet was your alter ego, to coin the name of my comic. But yes, it was your way of trying to, like, that side of you could come out in that mode. And I think all of us have that in some way. It's not necessarily like, there's an aspect of feeling like you're putting on a mask, but in general, it's like, well, the best way I can put it is like, you have one life on this earth, but in that one life are multiple lives, right? With your occupation, but how you're like with your friends, how you're like with your family, how you're like with different family members are all different. Like you're different people throughout all of your life. So this whole idea of an alter ego or a different identity is just, to me, is just some form of that, rather than, you know, because some people might criticize it to be like, oh, you're just pretending to be someone you're not. I'm like, is it? Or is it one where like you get to be different parts of yourself?
Okay, now you're reminding me. Remember back in the day, in middle school especially, you would be like, oh, you're fake around him, you're different around him, or, you know, like, people were like this, right? When around early preteen era, and it's like, you notice adults aren't like this. I mean, of course, it's immature sounding for sure, but I think most people innately sort of finally realize that, like, just different people bring different things out of you when you're hanging around different. So I feel like that connects to what you were just saying, Ben.
That too. Yeah.
I agree. And how cool that maybe around XYZ person, I can be more the mentor, you know, role. And I like that. All right, cool. And over here, I can be more the student, you know, and over. And I definitely am all for a life of many archetypes. Like, if you get locked into one, it's hardening. It's not, it's hard to grow if you're locked into like, well, I always have to show up as the mentor. Then you can never be wrong, dude, you know, and you can never, that kind of thing. So I try and check myself and make sure I'm not getting too stuck in any archetype. So I guess if I did cosplay, I'd have to change my costume pretty often.
Yeah, but it does, it becomes more complicated, right? Because now it's like you can be mentor and student at the same time, and that's okay, as opposed to like many versions of that archetype where it's just like, well, it's just the wise mentor figure. Like you never really see who, like, you know, Karate Kid is one of our favorite franchises. Like but we don't really see Miyagi as a student, you know, throughout that series. But you know, we have to get used to the fact in life that there are going to be times where you're Miyagi, and there's other times where, you know, you're the Karate Kid. Like you're going to be in both roles. You know, you can relate to both characters. You can be both Batman and Robin. It doesn't always have to be one or the other. You're not always the sidekick, or you're not always the mentor.
Agreed. But I think Vogler is a big fan of that too, that it makes for better storytelling if your characters are flowing into different archetypes often.
Sure.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I think because the audience has that familiarity, right? They're just like, oh, like this is this guy. Like, oh, he's the Miyagi character, or he's the Mickey, and this guy's the Rocky, or whichever version of the, you know,
and then one thing he, like, I think I read it in his book, he said that, and when we see a villain character start to push over into like a hero character, we love that. Like we love when people cross their archetypes. He mentioned like an episode in Taxi where, I don't know that TV show that well, but he's like the bad character became this real nice guy for one episode, and it was the favorite episode of everyone's in the whole thing. And of course, we love watching Darth Vader become a good father.
Yeah. Yes, that's the main one. Yeah.
Redemption. We love the cross, you know, when someone leaves their archetype and becomes something else. It's kind of, I think, fulfilling.
Yeah, and I think sometimes the other way around too, because we could be very attracted to the dark side. You know, we can love you know the villain stories. You know, Andrew and I have been talking a lot in our Patreon about the Penguin show that just came out, and just like the appeal of the dark side is still there, and being able to watch that, you know, as the characters going through that growth, or like the opposite of growth in some cases when it comes to the villains, and being able to like get in touch with the dark side, but without like you succumbing to it in real life, you know, watching, you know, that's kind of the theory of why a lot of gangster movies or movies about like bad guys are still popular, because of the ability to like get in touch with the dark side, but without you literally being a guy who's out there killing people and throwing them into the sea, you know, with cement shoes. Like it's being able to like, again, live another life in some way for another like 2 hours.
Absolutely.
Don't mimic that too much, though.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Please don't.
Agreed. I haven't watched the Penguin one yet.
Oh man, you might like it. It's pretty good.
I think so.
Yeah.
So let's see. The other question we were curious about, because I know a lot of the times throughout the series, right? It's referred to as, oh, we're doing the movie, or Darren says that he regrets doing the movie, but obviously right now, it's more than a movie. It's a 4-part series. So did this come about just due to the amount of material, or was it like what came about when
post-production. We were post-production. We're editing, and we're the first 40 minutes or so. I even said to Darren, I'm like, just watch the first 40 minutes, because he was, you know, again feeling like this is a really difficult process. And I said, I'll be done with the first 40 minutes in a couple weeks, and I think it's really strong. And it was, you know, become basically episode 1, 42 minutes. But I also realized, like, I'm not far enough along in my story structure and my arcs for 40 minutes. Like, this is, I can't only have 45 more minutes to finish this up. Like, there's no way. So I just kept editing like the story I wanted to tell and the pieces I wanted to tell. And it naturally, you know, after quote unquote episode 2, I'm like, yeah, this has to be 4 parts, because I can see it. You know, I had a big structure for the whole thing on boards, right? This is where I think it's all going to go as we hop into post. I just didn't know how long minutes wise that would really take. And when I realized we're 40 minutes to only get to this point, I go, oh, well, this is more like a, you know, in essence, 4 times 4, 160, but ended up being 200 minutes, you know, of material. So yeah, that's what happened. And I just made the kind of ballsy jump to say that this is what it is. We're not going to try and fit it into 90. And limited series are kind of cool now, thankfully. But it wasn't like a marketing thing, like, oh, that's what's hot, I'm going to do a limited series or blah, blah, blah. It was just, the story Story made me do it.
Great timing with the Superman documentary as well. You probably have some synergy going on there.
I think, yeah.
Chris Weave.
Yeah, the Christopher Reeve story. Yeah, I think so. I think it's great timing. I don't know. Yeah, I mean,
and another story about a family and a father who's not with us. So
yeah,
like there's a
exactly.
thematic connection as well.
Yeah,
it's definitely like Superman is up right now, right? What's in July, the new Superman film. It's like, oh wow, there's a lot around Superman now, so it is also good timing there. It feels like.
I've thought about this actually lately too. It felt like when the Nolan trilogy was out, it felt like no one, like 15 years ago, no one cared about Superman at all. People didn't care. Yeah, they because Nolan movies were out, Batman stock was at an all-time high, so I get it. But there is something to be said about the pandemic causing people to become hopeless, and I don't know. The tide has turned. And Superman stock is going way up now. It feels like, to me at least. So, and you're seeing it with all this content out now that's Superman related. So yeah.
Yeah, I think throwing James Gunn at the helm too helps for Superman, because he's got such a cool, I'd say, eye on things. I loved. For this series, I started watching some stuff I normally wouldn't. I went and watched The Peacemaker on HBO, and I'm like, oh, I love this. I just loved it because it's comedy.
Yeah,
I just
awesome.
like comedy. I started in comedy. I'm like, this is funny, and it's so dark, and it's again conflicted. Like his father's this kind of evil guy, right?
Yeah.
Part of someone tipped me off to watch it. It's like, oh, this is really interesting. I love that. So, and that's a James Gunn one. So I think he'll do a great job. Bringing Superman back to the limelight. Maybe it's because we want more morals and we're losing a little bit of morals. I don't know.
Yeah. It's that plus I think it's still we're 5 years away, but we're still reeling from the pandemic. I feel like that was just quite a lot to take in. Was there did you have to kill any of your darlings? Was there any scenes that you cut that you really loved that you can talk about?
That I can talk about. I used to mistakenly say "kill your babies" instead of "darlings." Someone's like, "I don't think that's I don't think that's what people say, Adam." Any babies you had to kill? No, my darlings. Let me think. A lot was left on the edit floor. That's for sure. What did I? Yes, here's a topic that I would have liked to go into. That I didn't. It's not the sexiest topic, but originally I had this more lofty idea of really bringing out the idea of commodification. We touch on it a little bit, and how we definitely touch on authenticity. So authenticity, I think, becomes a thread throughout, and Brian loves his raw books versus the slab books. And we talk about authenticity with Darren and the heroic quality of that in episode 4, where he kind of comes clean. It's like, I didn't really say what I wanted to on the news. The heroic idea of authenticity, but commodity within that, in like the authentic collector versus the commodification, the people that are just in it for the investment, and how that messes with the real collector, the person that wants these books. Now they're just too expensive. And how we see that in real estate, someone, like these big corps come into Denver and buy all the single family homes, and you're like, wait a second. And then they rent them out, and you're like, now people can't afford single family homes as their home. And you've just commodified a home instead of making it a dwelling, what it was there for, and something that we could have, and like a book like that we want to have and read. Of course we can, because we can get reprints, but in some way priced it away from the general person and made it into this whole, again, capitalistic commodification of things. And I just get really sad when everything gets commodified and it loses a bit of its innocence and value, and the average cat can't enjoy it the way they would like to. It's more apparent to me like with homes than it is maybe with comic books, because you can just have a reprint. So I kind of wanted to go there at one point. I love poking the bear, and I love like throwing darts at like BlackRock, who bought all those homes. And who actually owns CGC too, I think. So maybe it's good I didn't throw darts at them. Or that's Black. Is it Blackstone? I think it's Blackstone. Yeah, maybe it's good I said the wrong name. So yeah, that's somewhere I wanted to go. I think commodification and authenticity. I don't know. Do you guys have a feeling on that? Like as comic guys and collectors, do you feel priced out?
It's kind of like what you said, where in some ways it depends on the fan as well as the product. So here with the comic, if it's something that can, like, there's reprints of it, that's going to satisfy most people, right? Like Andrew and I aren't going to be the ones who are bidding on that Superman #1, but we'll read Superman #1 like when there's a reprint of it, and that's fine because, like, to us, it's about the stories and the mythology. I don't need to ever hold the original 1938 Superman #1 in my hands. It'd be awesome, but it's not something that's really on my bucket list. But for some people, that is, and I think for those specific people, they are in the price range. They are like the big time collectors, and so I guess it's kind of down to them in terms of whether or not that's something that bothers them or if that intrudes in some way on comic book fandom. But for me, it's always been about the stories, and like I'll read. I mean, I've got multiple different collections that have like the same story reprinted throughout. You know, if you pick up a lot of different Batman collections, there's going to be a lot of the same stuff that comes up, like the first appearance of Batman, the first appearance of Robin, the first appearance of Joker. And like, there's not a huge difference to me reading it from one collection to the next. There's something cool about reading maybe sort of the older versions of it, but it is still the same story at the end of the day. So for me, I'm not somebody who's going, you know, if I even was able to afford it, I don't know if that would be what I would choose to invest in. Other than I've joked with Andrew getting Detective Comics #1, which has the caricature of an Asian man on the cover, just to have it as a conversation piece.
Nice! Oh wow! I have to look at the cover while Andrew's talking.
Like, Ben, why do you have this? I love that idea.
I just want this cover, man.
But I agree. I mean, look, I understand why that whole business exists, and you know, it's inevitable that would happen given the history, et cetera, and the popularity rise. But at the end of the day, Ben and I are pretty similar in this. We just want to be inspired and read a good story, and from that can come from a reprint, man. That can come from an online PDF. Really, you know, I don't really give a shit.
Totally. And maybe that's why I didn't make it in the film in the end, you know, because I was reaching a little with the whole real estate, and it's like, okay, Adam, you can keep your kind of some of your themes out. I was able to get Nietzsche's Uber mentioned there, so I feel like, okay, I got to have my say, and I didn't want to have my thumbprint too much on it. I was just talking to a friend of mine who is more in like the, you know, spiritual community and TV, that kind of stuff. And he's like, oh, I can feel your incense all over this series in a good way, you know. He's like, because I can feel the spirituality, and I can, you know, and then when you got to Ubermensch and Hanuman, I really felt you. And it's like, yeah, you know, I got to go some places someone else probably wouldn't, that was handling this in episode 4. So I got to have my hand in it there, but I tried not to be too heavy-handed through the rest of the stuff, because the story itself I thought was pretty fascinating, especially on the mental health side.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Circling back a bit, I know you mentioned Peacemaker as something you really loved, and that you kind of watched some other stuff that was in this genre. I'm sure just sort of get more familiar with this world. Were there any other like highlights that stood out for you in terms of like stuff that you watched?
Yeah, of course. The Supermans right away. Something I wanted to really, although I grew up with Superman 1, 2, and 3, you know, of course, with the 3 villains, you know, that is kind of a scene that I wanted to play more with was them in the film, especially when they were bored, like taking over the world. They're like, now what? We own it all, and like they're just sitting there, like totally bored. And I love that, because it just, to me, again, like just speaks to society. But wait, what was the question? Where did I get off there?
Other aspects of the like comic book movie genre that you got to like watch for this that stood out for you, or TV show?
So I got to watch the Donner cut, and I didn't know about that. I didn't know Superman had the Donner. Nice. I didn't know the whole backstory of Donner. So that was really fascinating because I love Marlon Brando, and I loved hearing how people held their principles, and that's why Brando really wasn't in part, 2, and they used the mom a lot more. That was to me fascinating. I did want to again
for ADR for that one either.
Yeah. I like Brando's just so principled like that. It's so cool. So yeah, I did. I loved learning about that, and I was really looking for that, how to use anything of Brando and the father son, and it was almost like I wanted them to say some other things more clear than they did in those movies, and they didn't, and I had remembered it almost incorrectly. And I'm like, oh, I thought he said XYZ, and that would be perfect for Darren and his dad, but they didn't. So there was a lot of moments I really wanted to pull from Superman 1 and 2, really one that didn't end up working, but it was fun to research. I just really love it. And Green Lantern I always liked, so I got to watch that more than I probably would have. And
wouldn't have pegged that.
Yeah. I mean, I just like Green Lantern, but I can't even really say why. Maybe I just like the color. What else did I research? Got to
with Superman 2, the Donner cut. Real quick, the scene I'm envisioning is the big one that's in the Donner cut of how Clark gets his powers back, where like Brando now like steps out and physically touches Christopher Reeve. I'm like, I was thinking like, that could have been cool, but then at the same time, I'm just like, I don't know thematically how that would have tied in with Darren and his dad. But
yeah,
it is a cool moment at least.
Yeah, and I was just even with the regular cut, I really wanted to use Darren and Brando and more about some of the things that he says, like it's up to you, like like the power, like I can give you the information, but you kind of have to experience it yourself. You have to figure it out. Wasn't as clear as I wanted it to be, but I knew the intention was like, we're just information, we're not real. Like it's up to you to figure out like what's right and wrong, basically, is what it felt like Brando was telling his son. And I felt like that's exactly what Darren's dad gave him in many ways, was like, it's up to you, dude. But it was never perfectly said. But I loved watching it over and over and being like, I swear they said this better. And like, like you're like, wasn't there a scene where he said this better? I swear to God.
Yeah, sadly, I can't remember a specific line. I think it's all implied, I guess.
And then Sarah, who plays, is her name Ursa? Is that correct? The evil villain. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Sarah is her first name. I'm spacing on her last name, but she's a neighbor. Sarah Douglas. She's a neighbor of my good friend over in West Hollywood. And so they're super tight. So I was on the phone with her trying to get her interview, but the timing never worked out right. And so I was close to getting Sarah, and I was pushing for Terrence Stamp. Zod. I talked to his agents in the UK, and I really pitched how I wanted to use him, because I don't know if I read his autobiography, but because I wanted him to be in this film badly, but because he spent 10 years in India, Terrence Stamp did, before becoming Zod. So he was kind of a leading character. Then he went away to India for years and comes back and is more willing to not be leading man, and plays a villain in Zod, and goes off and then does Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, and things like this, these other roles that are just totally out there, because a lot of he kind of got through a lot of his BS and his ego when he went to India. And I'm like, ooh, who better to help us talk about the inner world and growth than Zod? I'm like, like the evil villain. Again, the evil villain would be the guy that helps us move in that direction. Like, again, audiences love that when you have this villain that somehow, this guy is really like the enlightened cat. And he really is from reading his book, he's quite an enlightened fellow. Yeah.
They also brought him in to do Jor-El in the Smallville show too, so you kind of got the other father figure type of aspect to his history. Obviously, not as famous as with Zod, but for the millennials who grew up with Smallville, that there is there's that aspect as well. I can't say that there was a moment where he said something about like, you have the information, it's up to you to do something with it. But and his Jor-El, maybe it's because it was Terrence Stamp, like they kind of made him a little bit more sinister seeming or not as caring about humanity like Marlon Brando's. So I don't know if
how strange that they got him to, play Zod in one and then Jor-El in the other.
Yeah.
Maybe,
I was feeling at any moment in that series it'd be like, psych, it's not actually Jor-El, it's Zod pretending to be Jor-El.
Psych. If he's watching right now, which I'm sure he is watching this podcast, let's do an episode 5 of Selling Superman where Terrence comes to Darren's collection and like convinces Darren to sell Superman. Yeah.
Oh man. That would be awesome.
And he's the one who buys it at the end.
Yeah, and then he buys it or something.
Yeah,
Darren just gives it to him. Darren's
my
like,
plan
no, this
all
is
along.
the way. This is the way.
Oh man, I would never. I would sell it myself, but I don't care what relationship I had with my dad. That's just me. I'm not like it's interesting what happens in the documentary.
If anything, to me, in Darren's shoes, again, can't speak for him, but like it does make it a little easier with the idea that like his dad didn't read these. Like if his dad was like a hardcore Superman fan, like the biggest Superman fan ever, and that's why he had these, then all right, there's more sentiment to it, I guess. So
he loved what I do know is he loved like with his college buddies debating which hero had the most powers, who would beat who. So I'm sure he was reading to some extent, but like on the day-to-day like buying, like he wasn't buying to read that one. It seemed like he was like just enjoyed the collect, the hoard, the hobby, the invest. He called it an investment, but it wasn't. So it's hard to be inside someone's brain that's gone, and also that was just seeing things a little bit divergent, if you will.
Sure.
Yeah. So you have like, what is this, a Buddha in the background? You mentioned Hanuman earlier. You talked about Terrence Stamp being in India for 10 years. So you're into Eastern religion, or can I say that? Or
sure, you can say Eastern spirituality, yogic thought. Absolutely, since I was probably 15. Yeah.
And this influences your filmmaking style?
1,000%. Yeah.
In what ways would you say?
Well, I didn't set out to become a filmmaker. Filmmaking is something that came from my desire to seek truth. And cool, I got my cat too. We all got cats, I think. Boom, boom, boom. 3 cats in the building.
Yeah, I wanted to show up and have a cameo.
That's awesome. I mean, look, I always loved I loved an early book from Chopra that was integrating science and spirituality, Ageless Body, Timeless Mind. So that's from a science brain kid. I studied engineering and such. That helped me kind of crack open. And then meditation from an early age, 18, I started doing that. I found that very helpful for, again, athletics and controlling my emotions on the field. Saw the practical application. And then I just really just dove in any chance I could, like retreats. And this is back in, early 90s before it was kind of fashionable. Retreats or studying, just grabbing books from the library. Remember, I mean, this is pre-internet too, to be honest.
Yeah.
So I was voraciously grabbing that. So that's what pushed me. And that's why I loved improv comedy, because it was kind of a yogic art in many ways. Like there's a yes anding, there's an in the moment. It's very present. You're dropping the ego. And so I found that very beautiful and healthy. So I was always kind of expressing my looking for meaning or looking for truth, and desire to also share what I've learned. Oh, this is what I've learned. So let's have some characters that can resonate that and can show that. So my first documentary, though, I wasn't trying to become a documentary filmmaker. I happened to be in India, and my teacher, my master, said, "Hey, do you want to go over the Himalayas on motorcycles over the highest road in the world, 18,600 feet?" And I did not know how to ride motorcycles, and he had a prophecy he would die in an accident, and I said, "Yes, absolutely." And then we thought, let's invite other people. And then we thought, these are beautiful places to show, because people won't go to rarely go to these places. So we should film it. And it became my first documentary called The Highest Pass. And I fell in love with the art of doc filmmaking. And it's very much a spiritual, it's an adventure, spiritual. It feels like a narrative, because it's got such a in the moment type feel to it. And I just fell in love with it. But a lot of things that have come from that, I do tend to take a different angle, or just like I said, I love the inner journey, and I like to see where people might be growing or what we can learn about how we see the world through something that's naturally engaging, be it, risking your life is a good one. Those are high stakes, if nothing else.
So you're trying to, via documentary filmmaking, find a internal truth or external or both.
Yep.
Find that for yourself probably, and then edit, and then, and then show that to the world. That's kind of the workflow.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, yeah. And or I know I'm going to come from that angle. Like with this one, I knew I would be looking, like with Selling Superman, I knew I would be looking at what's real power, what's valuable. And to me, I know the power, the inner power, the way we see the world is the power we actually have control. It's not so much about can I fly or this, but can I value myself? Can I switch how I perceive? I mean, this is true yogic power. Like this is Nietzsche. Nietzsche's to me like very yogic, as much as the philosophers I talk to are like, I don't think so. I'm like, dude, trust me. The deeper teachings of yoga, Nietzsche and yoga are aligned. Like you just have to read deeper.
Interesting.
Because he's all about like drop the conditioning, drop the values that you were taught, and decide for yourself. In essence, you are the powerful source. You determine how you interact with the world. So I'm always going to have that lens, but it could be a social documentary. We're just going to I went to Kazakhstan and we were looking at the nuclear testing they did in Kazakhstan. So it's very much a social documentary of like, wow, you need to take care of these people that you tested upon, basically. But we wanted to focus on how the people themselves were helping each other, like how, again, they have the power.
Yeah.
So like it's just little tweaks where it's not trauma drama. I would tend toward like, where's the power? Where's the humanity in it? And then sometimes more on the nose, where like a film like Heal that I produced is all about like our power to help the healing process through emotions, through spirit, through laughter, through stress reduction, things that kind of seem normal, but are a bit alternative. And that, or like the Highest Pass, where we're riding, with a guru through the Himalayas, literally looking for, searching for faith or freedom and things like that. I love that stuff. I love Road to Dharma. Same thing. It's like a 10-part series I did about freedom. Yeah. So
one more indulgent question about this, and I know we're getting way off topic from Selling Superman, but we're already over an hour in. I really want to know, you're in India, you're studying yoga and yogic traditions.
Yes.
I know this answer could be like a several mini-series long answer, but if there's a short answer, I'd love to hear it, or a short-ish answer. What is sort of the main disconnect culturally with what are white people at Erewhon not getting about about yoga? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
what?
I do know what you mean.
Like, where's can you comment on the cultural gap here? How are Indian people understanding it? How are white people in Erewhon and Whole Foods understanding it or not understanding it? You know what I mean? Can you comment on any of this stuff?
Sure. And there's plenty of people in India that might just have statues and Hindu figures that aren't actually practicing, right? Aren't meditating and things. So there's a disconnect there too, where it becomes just a religious thing or cultural thing.
Yeah.
But I would say the main disconnect here is thinking that yoga is about feeling better, and that's a nice byproduct. But the yogic tradition isn't about, you don't, as Anand says in the Road to Dharma over and over, you do not come here to feel better. You come here to transcend. Okay. So if we keep pleasure seeking or wanting it to feel better, we're rarely going to get out of the box. We're rarely going to become the thing that we want to, like you're talking about, to put ourselves in a role where we become the thing we want to be. The person we know is ready to unleash. You're going to have to transcend, and that's going to be pilgrimage. That's going to be hard. So I think a lot of times we're seeking the perfect body or the great practice that feels so good, and all that's fine. But like the deeper yogic teachings tend to be more about like cutting through the bullshit and saying, well, what's actually true? and how much power do you really have, and are you willing to practice and rewire yourself to remember that, and also along the way just forgive yourself, like be really kind to yourself and compassionate. In the Buddhist sense, like happiness doesn't need a reason. Like you're allowed to be happy if you're 15 pounds overweight. It doesn't matter. You're allowed to be kind to someone even if you don't get anything out of it. And yeah, you can be kind to yourself if you haven't made it. You know what I mean? Like we make mistakes all the time, and I think some of those basics of kindness and happiness and what it then takes to transcend all the BS we've learned is not easy. It's not easy. Anyway, that's my take.
I love that stuff. I'll bring it back around. Mimicking Superman is free and connects to what you're talking about. I know you can mimic hate or whatever too, and that's also free. Yes, whatever. But choose the higher path if you can, please.
Agree. Totally agree. Yeah. Right? Yeah.
I think there's also another factor of people not embodying the deeper aspects, like what you were talking about, right? Like it is a common superhero trope where the hero and the villain have the same powers, right? Or they have the same goal in some ways, but the villain is the perversion of the goal, right? Or is in some way taking the same power, but this person crosses the line that the hero won't. And so that's a common theme that comes out in different heroes that, like whenever I look at it in real life, it's usually some version of what you were just talking about with sort of yoga, where every single, unfortunately, like it seems like every single thing that is out there that's good, some people just take this most superficial version of it, or there's a perversion of the ideals in there, or some sense where like, with say psychotherapy or people who are becoming more self-aware about their own like demons and their own like past traumas, and yet I think it's gotten to a point where it's become so popularized that some people take like the bare minimum or the most superficial aspects of it, claim to be self-aware, but aren't actually like putting in the work. They just read a lot of books on it, like it's a different type of thing. And I think the principle that you've been talking about that I think applies to superheroes is like do the actual work, like do the deeper elements of it. Don't just take the most superficial don't take the immediate reward, go for the sort of enlightenment aspect of this, the part that is spiritually freeing to you, whether that's the ideals of helping others or being able to let go of the ego, or all these other principles that sort of pervade both Eastern and Western different philosophies over the past histories. There are certain just ideals that are kind of universal that come out. So I think it speaks to how we we tend to just take the most superficial aspects of stuff, but it's really the deeper stuff that's the way through.
I like that.
The only way out is through.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's what they really mean. It's so true. It's so true. There's no way out, man. You gotta feel it. You gotta feel it. Oh, that's cool. That's cool. I love that you guys think this way, especially, as writers, we don't have to, we don't have to be so on the nose with spirituality. It's just like infusing it into our stories where these characters are finding power or making choices that are altruistic that hopefully people mimic, like you're saying, Andrew, like people. I have had enough of true crime series because I don't want to mimic that. I don't want to.
And also people get tired. Evil Superman stories were like a thing for a while, and then I think it's finally dawned on everybody that this sucks. We're so tired. This is not what Superman's about. It was interesting for like a year back in the 90s or whatever whatever it was but it's just not. That's not why we want to read this shit. So
when it was cool was back with the Hall of Justice cartoon when there was Bizarro super and Mitzelplick or whatever
I like him. I like him too. Yeah.
That stuff I know. You want, if we want to talk, geek out on like the Hall of Justice cartoon. All right, I was in for that every morning.
Yeah. Meanwhile, at the Hall of Doom.
Yes, exactly.
Their head rises up.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So classic.
Well, anything else, Ben, before we're out of here?
I guess to wrap things up, we kind of talked about how this gave you a little bit more appreciation of the archetypes of different superheroes. When it comes to Superman specifically, were there things that you learned about him through this documentary, with his character specifically, that you learned to appreciate more of?
Yeah, I learned through Kevin Shinnick, who was one of the experts, and through Darren, both of their appreciation for the morals and the moral dilemma of Superman. Darren really, I love the reality TV scene we did in episode 2, because that's as much as I'm shooting it fake on purpose. I knew what I was going to use it for in some way, but I also knew these guys were going to debate for real about Superman versus Batman. And I just love when Darren's just really, like, it's probably 40 minutes, to be honest, of what they actually, the conversation. But Darren's points of, like, he is a conflicted character. He really struggles with how to be in both worlds, how to love his family and how to serve humanity. That's something I really didn't think much about, because it hasn't been an adult introspection of mine. Superman, it was more when I was a kid. So that's been cool. And I love what Kevin says in the film, that he thinks we'll have superpowers before we'll have the powers of the morality of Superman. And it's quite damning of our society, but I think it's a nice warning. Like, oh yeah, like, wow, it's harder for us to learn how to be kind to each other than it is to, like, create a bionic suit to fly. Like, tech is easy in comparison with, like, becoming a good person. And I don't think it is, like, to me, it's easier to be a good person, but for some reason in our society, it's valued less. And I think I really do feel Superman, maybe that's why the Renaissance, Andrew, is coming of him, is because we do need that hope that people can value each other more.
This connects to, some, you might have heard this on your journey, but he's not just called Man of Steel, he's called Man of Tomorrow. What does that mean? It's like the beacon of hope for humanity itself, for us to actually find our way out of this darkness, out of our base desires. And the way I see Man of Tomorrow, really, it could be mythology influencing mankind itself to have something to mimic that helps us to see the light and have a Star Trek-like future, in a sense, like shit like that. Like,
cool.
And we'll have to, we're going to go through
some
major hell.
Man of Tomorrow, you're saying Man of Steel is also called, like, is Man of Tomorrow something that's
it's another name of him? Yeah, just Batman's the Dark Knight and the Caped Crusader. Like, it's another variation.
I didn't know that.
It might have meant something a little different to the creators in the beginning, but it definitely has evolved and stuck around a little bit. And I always thought it was pretty cool, because
it's cool.
The Man of Tomorrow could, I don't know if that really points to Superman. I think that points to mankind, how mankind will be in the future.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This is now there's dystopian sci-fi, left and right, Matrix, Fallout, whatever. And it's fine, but I also get tired of that. And Star Trek was different. It was not dystopian. How are we ever going to have a positive future if we can't even imagine it?
Love it.
If we can't even make up this fake guy called Superman and believe that this could ever happen, how are we ever going to if we can't even believe in this, how are we ever going to get there anyway? If we can't even imagine a positive future, we'll never get there.
Well said.
So let's at least start with Superman. That's how I feel about it.
Yes, that's cool.
That's the philosophy of Superman, in my opinion.
And that is hopeful. That's great. That's awesome. That's very hopeful.
Yeah,
I love it. The Man. You're more of a Nietzsche fan than you realize, I think.
Yeah, I need to read more Nietzsche. I know Overman and all that has related to all that. I know for sure, but yeah.
Awesome. I guess last thing is there anything that you want to share that you're currently working on?
Like next films, that kind of thing?
Sure. Yeah.
Of course, we've been working on the release of Selling Superman, so of course people can go buy it on Apple and Amazon and Google Play. That's a huge, it's crazy that filmmakers have to become marketers too, and businessmen, but we do. And then the next one is that I'm helping, and I brought in a great director to direct this one because she really is perfect for the topic. But it's called Aaron's Law, and if you go to aaronslawfilm.com, and this one again it's helping kids, there's been a lot of sexual abuse out there, and Aaron's Law again is this, it's not trauma drama. We're taking someone that's had taken victimhood and turned it into a positive thing. She created a law that helps teach kids what's safe and not safe touch, and it ends up really inspiring people to speak up, and it stops these things from happening. So aaronslawfilm.com, and we have a sizzle up there so you can get an idea of her story is amazing. She was on Oprah, Katie Couric. She's been Glamour Woman of the Year. She created the law. She's passed it in 38 states, and we got 12 left. So that's part of the film is following the last 12. And anyway, so that's a very impactful film, and one I couldn't say no to help make. For the kids. If we're talking about heroes and hope, that's definitely one of those films. Yeah.
Awesome, man. This has been an awesome interview, dude.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, likewise. This was fun to hang out with you guys.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on. And with that, that is superhero stuff you should know.